In the shadowy history of science, not every breakthrough was made in a lab. Some were made in kitchens, in living rooms, on unsuspecting people who never agreed to be part of the experiment. And sometimes, those people paid the ultimate price. This is one of those stories, a case of trust betrayed, lives endangered, and justice still pending. In the city of Coventry, a group of 21 South Asian women were approached with what seemed like a simple request: eat a freshly made chapati each day, provided by local health workers to help monitor and improve iron levels in their blood. Many of these women had recently moved to the UK. They didn't speak fluent English. They trusted the system. They trusted their doctors. Some had been referred to the study by their local GP, a well-known community figure. They were told it was a nutritional program meant to help them, and they believed it. What they weren't told was that those chapatis were dosed with radioactive iron isotopes, specifically iron 59. The goal? To see how well the immigrant body absorbed iron. The women weren't sick, they were just convenient test subjects. No proper informed consent, no detailed explanation of the risks. Many couldn't even read the forms they were given. What they thought was healthcare was actually a secret medical experiment, one now considered unethical by today's standards. The justification? Officials said they were trying to help, that anemia was common in South Asian women, and this research would lead to better treatments. Years passed. Many of the women never knew. Some began experiencing fatigue and health issues, never linking it back to that harmless visit to the clinic. Some passed away, never learning the truth. It wasn't until the late 1990s that documents from the Medical Research Council were exposed by journalists. What they found was damning. Internal memos acknowledging the women hadn't understood what they were agreeing to. Handwritten notes indicating the tests were done because immigrant communities were easier to work with. There was no translation, no proper follow-up, no accountability. The public backlash was swift, but the apology came slow. It took decades before government officials acknowledged that what happened was wrong, but the damage was already done. In early 2025, human rights groups reignited pressure on the UK government to formally compensate the surviving families of the women used in the radioactive iron experiments of the 1960s. Many of these women were young mothers, recent immigrants, and non-English speakers, vulnerable and intentionally targeted because of it. They were prisoners, orphans, soldiers, and they never knew they were being used as test subjects. In 1946, American public health officials launched a secret medical experiment in Guatemala that would remain hidden for more than 60 years. Led by Dr. John Charles Cutler, a physician working for the U.S. Public Health Service, the team set out to study how well penicillin could treat and possibly prevent sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid. But instead of using voluntary test subjects or ethical methods, they did something far more disturbing. They deliberately infected people without their knowledge or consent. Over 1,300 Guatemalan individuals were used as test subjects. Some were injected directly with bacteria. Others were exposed through arranged sexual contact with sex workers who had been intentionally infected. In many cases, subjects were told nothing. They were simply observed as the diseases took hold. Some participants were given penicillin as treatment, but others were only partially treated or left completely untreated, so researchers could track the course of the illness. At least one death was directly linked to the experiments. The full extent of harm remains unknown because records were incomplete and follow-up was minimal. The study ended in 1948. It was never published. The documents were filed away and the people involved moved on, some to high-ranking positions in public health. The truth didn't surface until 2010, when historian Susan Reverby uncovered archived documents at the University of Pittsburgh. What she found shocked the medical community and the world. President Barack Obama issued a formal apology to Guatemala. A U.S. bioethics commission called the experiments a clear violation of human rights. But legal efforts for justice were blocked. A federal court dismissed the victims' lawsuit in 2012, ruling that the U.S. government couldn't be sued for actions taken outside its borders. No criminal charges were ever filed. No compensation was ever paid. And most of the victims' names are still unknown. Imagine a school for children with intellectual disabilities. Now imagine that same school becoming a laboratory, a place where children were deliberately infected with disease, all under the justification of science. This was Willowbrook State School in Staten Island, New York. At first glance, Willowbrook was supposed to be a place of care for children who needed extra support. But behind its locked doors, something horrifying was happening. Doctors had noticed that hepatitis, a contagious and painful disease that attacks the liver, was spreading rapidly through the facility. Instead of cleaning up the school's poor sanitation or protecting the children, researchers decided to use the outbreak to study the disease more closely. So they did the unthinkable. They deliberately fed the children food and drinks laced with hepatitis, some with infected feces, or extracts from other sick children. Many of the children couldn't even speak. They had no way to refuse. And the only consent often came from desperate parents who were told their children could only be admitted to Willowbrook if they agreed to the study. In one of the richest cities in the world, poor, disabled children were being infected for science, with no benefit to themselves, only to medical journals. Many of these children got sick. Some developed chronic liver disease. One child was described as rocking silently in a corner, yellow from jaundice, crying without words. There was no apology, no rush to stop. This continued for nearly 14 years. And the worst part? The doctors claimed it was ethical. They argued that the children would likely get hepatitis anyway in such unsanitary conditions, so why not study it while they were infected? It took journalist Geraldo Rivera in the 1970s to sneak in with a camera and show the world what was happening behind the walls of Willowbrook. Dirty conditions, children in soiled clothing, staff overwhelmed and untrained, and a system that used society's most vulnerable as test subjects. Eventually, the public outcry forced Willowbrook to shut its doors. But the emotional scars, the medical damage, and the deep betrayal of trust still haunt the families today. Sometimes the scariest people aren't strangers. They're the ones living right next door. They seem normal, but behind the smile, something much darker is hiding. These aren't one-time mistakes. They're patterns of harm no one saw coming. It's shocking how far some people will go, again and again. Let's take a closer look at the stories behind these quiet faces. He blended in, a husband, a father, a successful architectural consultant. To most, Rex Heuermann looked like any other middle-aged man navigating New York's fast-paced life. But behind the tidy suburban image lay something terrifying, something police say spanned decades. The unraveling began in July 2023. In the heart of Manhattan, Heuermann was arrested in connection with the Gilgo Beach murders, one of the most unsettling investigations in modern American history. For years, the case had frustrated law enforcement. The remains of women, mostly escorts, were found wrapped and discarded along a remote stretch of Ocean Parkway. For over a decade, the trail had gone cold. What finally cracked it? A slice of pizza. Discarded crust from a surveillance operation provided DNA that matched genetic evidence found on multiple victims. It was the breakthrough detectives had long sought. Soon, more charges followed, not just for the initial victims, 3 women found in 2010, but also for others stretching back to the early 2000s and even as far back as 1993. Investigators later found a disturbing file on Heuermann's computer, something described in court as a digital roadmap. It detailed methods for avoiding detection, disposal strategies, and eerily detailed notes on how to prepare a scene. It was cold, calculated, disturbingly thorough. Yet while all this was happening, he lived in Massapequa Park with his family. Neighbors described him as quiet, even boring. His wife, shocked by the allegations, filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. Their home became the subject of intense forensic searches, with authorities seizing hundreds of items. Every drawer, crawl space, and hard drive was examined. Now in custody and awaiting trial, Hoyerman maintains his innocence. His legal team is fighting tooth and nail to challenge the use of advanced DNA techniques. In early 2025, a series of court hearings began to decide whether advanced DNA techniques used in the investigation are scientifically valid. The defense is still fighting to exclude this evidence, while prosecutors prepare for a possible trial in 2026. With each passing month, more connections are explored. Cold cases once forgotten are being re-examined under this new lens. Investigators believe there may be more victims, more names that never made headlines. Until now, behind that ordinary face may lie a history darker than anyone imagined. And while the courts will determine his fate, the full extent of what was hiding in plain sight may still be coming into focus. In the shadowed corners of the Southwest, a man with a disturbing vision moved between two states, hiding his darkness behind calm eyes and quiet behavior. Jason Thornburg, born in 1980, wasn't just another face in the crowd. He believed he had a divine mission. His descent began in 2017 when his girlfriend, Tanya Begay, vanished during a trip through Arizona. Though no remains were recovered, he later admitted to ending her life, claiming it was part of a sacred act. Her family searched endlessly, unaware that the man they trusted had already decided her fate. Years passed. Then, in May 2021, tragedy struck again. A house in Fort Worth, Texas, went up in flames. Inside, the charred body of his roommate, Mark Jewell, was found. It seemed like an accident, until Jason confessed. He had slit Jewell's throat and turned the house into an inferno to erase the evidence. But it wasn't over, not even close. That September, Jason rented a motel room in Ules. Within those walls, horror unfolded. Over the course of several days, 3 individuals, David Lueras, Lauren Phillips, and Maricruz Matis, entered that room. None made it out alive. Jason later told investigators he felt called to offer them as sacrifices. What followed was not only brutal, it was surgical. Bodies were dismembered. Blood was drained. One victim's heart was partially eaten. The acts were methodical, not impulsive. Eventually, he packed their remains into containers and set them ablaze in a dumpster. But the fire didn't hide everything. Surveillance footage caught his Jeep near the scene. When police searched his motel room, the evidence they found painted a picture so disturbing it shook even veteran detectives. During interrogation, he spoke with calm detachment, describing each death as if he were recounting a grocery list. He believed he was fulfilling a higher calling, one that demanded lives be taken in ritual. In court, prosecutors argued for the ultimate punishment. The jury agreed. By December 2024, Jason was sentenced to die by lethal injection. Now sitting on death row, he waits in silence, his twisted beliefs still echoing through every unspeakable act. The full scope of his intentions may never be known, but what's certain is this: 5 lives were stolen under the guise of salvation, and a man who thought himself chosen became an architect of terror. In a quiet neighborhood of Kigali, no one imagined the dark truth hiding behind the walls of a modest rental home in Gashikiri. Dennis Kazungu, a man in his early 30s, lived an unassuming life on the surface. He blended in, kept to himself, and paid little attention to the world outside. But beneath this ordinary facade was a history of horrifying actions that would leave an entire nation in disbelief. Between April 2022 and September 2023, a pattern unfolded, though few noticed it at first. Individuals, mostly women, vanished after nights out, never to be seen again. The connection between them was invisible until one crucial moment. Kazungu's landlord, frustrated over unpaid rent, contacted authorities to inspect the premises. That decision uncovered something no one was prepared for. Inside the house, investigators made a disturbing discovery. A pit dug beneath the kitchen floor, holding the remains of 12 people. Each one had suffered brutal violence. The silence of the home had hidden not just secrets, but suffering. As Kazungu was taken into custody, he confessed. 14 lives, 13 women, and 1 man. His reasons? Twisted and delusional. He claimed he was taking revenge, believing his victims had infected him with disease. What made the situation even more alarming was that just months before, Kazungu had already been arrested on separate charges of rape and theft. However, due to lack of strong evidence, he was released. That decision cost lives. His crimes weren't random acts of rage. They were calculated. He used false identities and manipulated strangers with a disturbing calmness. Many victims were drawn in from local bars, unaware they were walking into a trap. Once inside, they were assaulted, robbed, and silenced. When he stood before the court in 2024, Kazungu pleaded guilty to a total of 10 charges, ranging from murder to concealment of corpses. The sentence was severe, life behind bars with no opportunity for release. Despite appealing in 2025, hoping for leniency through expressions of regret, the court upheld the original ruling. The case sent shockwaves throughout Rwanda, not just because of its scale, but because it unfolded quietly in a community like any other. A man who passed unnoticed became the face of a tragedy that still lingers in memory.